So this is the 12, is it 12 or 11? 11:30 hours GMT, 12:30 hours UK time in London on Saturday the 10th of June 2023. So we are almost on time as we start broadcasting this part A of the Khudeelaar television channel, Baby Angel Geronimo editions. This particular edition starts with a comment. Our first comment, world exclusive original comment on the evilness personified, congenital liar, depraved, cruel, racist, inciter Boris Johnson being persuaded, let's say, to tender his resignation as a member of parliament in the UK House of Commons, the lower chamber, the lower house, with immediate effect. Now, although he didn't say anything about this, when we read in the last 48 hours an item in the British news media saying that the Privileges Committee, chaired by the Labour Party Member of Parliament, Harriet Harman in the House of Commons, had made available their report to Boris Johnson, contextually and based on historical evidence and various surrounding facts, we concluded that Boris Johnson was given the opportunity to resign instead of being pushed out of the House of Commons by the recommendation of the Privileges Committee, which would have meant that he would have been subject to, or he would have been the subject of a formal vote by the members of the House of Commons, based on the recommendation of the Privileges Committee chaired by Harriet Harman. And it is inevitable, it is almost without any doubt, that Boris Johnson would have been voted out. There was no way that a recommendation from the Privileges Committee, the Privileges Committee being the creature of the House of Commons itself, a recommendation by the Privileges Committee of the House of Commons recommending that Boris Johnson be ousted from the House of Commons, based on the evidence they found that Johnson had made a false statement, misleading statement. He had lied to members of parliament about the COVID-19 particular parties. This is the nearest equivalent, I think, of the moment is comparable to the moment that was marked by the opponents and campaigners against Margaret Hilda Roberts Thatcher. When she biologically passed away and died, there were reported dancing on the streets by her opponents, some of whom cried the politically inspired slogan, "The bitch is dead, the witch is dead." Not the bitch, the witch is dead. It has not been yet reported anywhere that I could see that any similar rejoicing by people who have long campaigned for Boris Johnson to be ousted from public life has yet taken place anywhere, either in London or anywhere else. Essentially, the Privileges Committee did a favor to the disgraced criminal because they spared him the inevitable alternative, which would have been that he would have been asked to leave, resign, or he would have been sacked by the vote of the House of Commons. This is simply on the evidence, on the facts, a historic moment. I came across this news about Johnson about midnight, say about just 12 hours ago, let's say. Now, as predictable, the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch's scum has got the evilness called Trevor, the Scottish-born criminal, Kavanagh. The criminal cannot be, I should say, condemned because there are no words, phrases available in the English language that I'm using, the English language in which I'm speaking, that can be found to remotely approximate to the badness that this evil Scottish-born cunt Trevor Kavanagh is. This shit, over the last many years, that this Trevor evilness cunt has been paid huge sums of money by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch. Not once has this cunt acknowledged any of the truth of the evilness, the badness, the lying, criminality, cruelty, racism that Johnson has perpetrated. And the line is extended in the promotional pieces run by the Murdoch owned news table, this containing the Times and the Scum and the Sunday Times. And it says he is kicking and screaming, but not gone for good. So they are refusing. These fucking cunts are refusing, even at this stage, that the evilness is politically gone. They want him to come back. Now, there is absolutely nothing in the records about associated with Johnson's, quote, activities, whatever those were, in ordinary broad political spectrum in the United Kingdom that can be remotely cited, mentioned as being of any significance whatsoever, except in the badness, except in the madness, except in the criminality, dishonesty, and corruption, and greed and petty mindedness and absolute shallow, pathetic, lowest possible denominator. This shit has never hesitated when money has been available to him from any source. So he's undignified, shameless, dishonorable, immoral, unethical, and selfish and greedy and all that. So we shall be, of course, going more into the evidence of the lying Boris Johnson in editions to come, in time, days, weeks to come, and beyond. And the I newspaper, which is owned by the Daily Mail, as I have said, the I newspaper, it emerged from the failures of the two-beard Lebedev, the son of the Russian intelligence KGB, Alexander Lebedev. So Alexander Lebedev's son, Two-Beards Lebedev, is recipient of the criminal Boris Johnson's endorsement in the form of a seat in the House of Peers, the so-called upper house in the UK Houses of Parliament. Now, when he owned the independent newspaper, which is no longer available as print newspaper, it's only available online newspaper. The independent was losing money, and the enterprise was losing money. And somebody thought up the idea of doing a tabloid offshoot, and they did so and called it I newspaper. And immediately the I newspaper became a hit. Its circulation shot up beyond anything that the Independent had done in its entire history, since it was founded in the 1980s by the Greek origin racist Andreas Whiteman Shit. Andreas Whiteman Shit and other racists set up the Independent. And the Independent declined. And Andreas Whiteman Shit is, of course, no longer connected with the Independent. He's long since. This I newspaper, since it became profitable, has changed hands. And it's currently owned by the Daily Mail, Associated Newspapers. But the tabloid form and the pretense that it is independent of the owners is only a pretense, it's a lie. Because the I newspaper, the reason why the Daily Mail has acquired it is precisely because it can be used as a newspaper equivalent of a Trojan horse. And it is now become the quote acceptable version of the unacceptable Daily Mail. And it insinuates ever so craftily very sleek small lines that actually promote, advance, insert the Daily Mail's core ideology, core narrative. So fuck you, Daily Mail, and fuck you, the I. And the cunt that is there in place as the editor is a fucking racist cunt. What's his name? So Oliver fucking Daft. Shit. So the Daily I newspaper is misedited by the racist criminal Oliver Daft. And they are not really telling the truth that being an independent title they should have been doing, telling the truth that is. And so therefore here is this front page of the weekend edition, which covers Saturday and Sunday. And this is the headline on this issue of Boris Johnson. Quote, Boris Johnson declares war on Sunak as he quits Parliament. Now, that should not be the headline. The headline should have been that Boris Johnson narrowly escapes being kicked out of the House of Commons by a vote of members of Parliament after being caught having lied, or after being found by the Privileges Committee of the House of Commons that he, Boris Johnson, lied to members of Parliament. So this is an example. Now there is another piece which is completely unconnected with the particular story, which is detailed on page 32 about a comment that Susie Dent, the dictionary corner woman on the countdown on Channel 4, reportedly made, and I noticed it about probably 2 weeks ago. That she said, according to that report, that swearing is good for you. So it says here, fuck. The F bomb is our most versatile word. So it's not page 32, page 25. So let's see what she's saying. And it's a piece published under the title of Opinion. What a relief! Swear word is no longer a textual lame duck. Blasphemy inspired a whole lexicon of sidesteps, from zounds to gazooks. And the Susie Dent piece on page 25, we'll just read a bit of the piece. Ask any linguist for the most versatile word in the English language, and chances are the F bomb will be near the top of the list. How many other words can function as a verb, noun, adjective, filler, intensifier, and exclamation? Until this week, however, it seemed that we were destined to forever duck up, not have a ducking clue, not give a duck, find everything ducking annoying, wear a duck off hat, and cry duck when stubbing our toe. Such, at least, has been Apple's curious auto-correction on our phone screens, while other full frontal words have flown beneath the radar. That is how that is now set to change. And Apple's imminent update means we will no longer get our ducks in a row while messaging when we were hoping for something stronger. In those moments when you just want to type a ducking word, Apple software chief has said the keyboard will learn it. Is it about time? Epso fucking duckly. The tech giant's choice to censor fuck has been a curious one, inviting both mirth and irritation on the part of its customers, etc., etc. So, this is something that, at least in one telephone conversation I had with someone, I mentioned Susie Dant and these swear words. And this followed my voluntary information that I swear in my writings quite a lot. Well, I would say that I don't swear enough. But essentially, this is something that I have found immensely relieving. There is a piece on page 27 written by Isabel Hardman, who is married to a Labour Party, ex Labour Party frontman. And this said that our zombie parliament is killing time when there is so much to do. Now, of course, zombie parliament and zombies are words and phrases that I've been using for decades. Not because there is no other word for it or no other phrase for it, but because that is exactly what these are. The British Parliament is zombie parliament, corrupt parliament, and it's a servile parliament, as is the British media, as is the British judiciary. So going over to the British media again, and there is this news about the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph being put up for sale or being about to be put up for sale by the Barclays family. Now, as anyone who has been familiar with the contents of the Daily Telegraph over the past, let's say, 10 years, knows that the Telegraph Group, under the Barclays ownership, has bribed Boris Johnson by paying him completely without any reason, any substance, any justification, millions and millions of pounds. And as I said earlier in this edition, Boris Johnson is a really petty-minded, low-minded, greedy, selfish, shameless, undignified individual who has never hesitated whenever he has been offered any money. In fact, the resignation that he announced yesterday from the UK House of Commons is part of the big heading news stories, at the center of which Boris Johnson has featured. And one of the other ones that lasted for weeks in the actual intensity has been Johnson's. Look at the elaborate way that he went about it. Johnson's elaborate, corrupt use of his power under the current corrupt arrangements, the power that is available to the British Parliament, the British incumbent as Prime Minister, to appoint or have the definitive say on appointing the chair of the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. Because what happened in the last, say, a month, if not longer, is the fact that Johnson used that man who was the eventual appointee to chair the BBC. Johnson used that individual in organizing a loan guarantee arrangement brokered by his Johnson's so-called and never before heard of a cousin who is domiciled in Canada. So that cousin somehow was to all the relevant parties by the person who later became the chair appointee, appointed to the chair by the BBC, by the Prime Minister incumbent. So that is the kind of example of Boris Johnson's criminality and abuse of positions. Now, during the period of his Boris Johnson's tenure as Conservative mayor at the expense of London, Johnson was given the most extraordinary pretext for running a platform under his name and running a so-called column with Johnson's name as the byline. And in return, the owners of the Daily Sunday Telegraph, the Barclays brothers as they are called, would pay Boris Johnson £50,000 per piece. Anyone who knows about writing, especially writing about evidence, doing fact checks and all the rest of it, would know that even to produce a piece as short, as brief as Boris Johnson's pieces were, it would take 3-4 days of research to get the facts right, get the perspective right, and all the rest of it. And yet, Boris Johnson apparently, without any problem, easily turned out the allocated length of the column every working week and was paid £50,000 allegedly in return for that piece. When this issue became the subject of political debate and Johnson was criticized by the Labour Party for raising this politically sensitive issue, it turned out that the amount that Boris Johnson received from the Barclays brothers wasn't being treated by Boris Johnson with any dignity, let alone any gratitude at all. So Boris Johnson condemned or dismissed that particular sum as chicken feed. Now, the fact that he did say that such a huge amount of money was being paid was no more than chicken feed, that is to say, a very small amount that was disproportionately inadequate to compensate him for writing what he was suggesting, such a phenomenally wise and impactful piece. Now, obviously, the Barclays brothers who decided to pay him the money, or whoever decided the payment, which went on for years, they must have decided, whoever they were, that Johnson's name, forget about the contents, forget about the substance of anything that appeared under his name as a columnist, that Johnson's name was enough as a name associated with the Telegraph newspapers, because that gave the titles, the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph, the appearance, that extended to legitimacy by connecting themselves with the power. Nobody has actually carried out a real analysis, content analysis, or consequence analysis about Boris Johnson's piece, the weekly piece, which was the pretext for him receiving £50,000 a piece. Now, that is evidence enough of the corrupt outfit that the Telegraph and the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph constitute together. And the shameless, corrupt career, the shameless, greedy, corrupt, selfish career of this shameless individual. There was nothing that could be suggested, and it most certainly wasn't suggested, that Boris Johnson's piece brought any benefit for the individuals reading the piece or the various decorations, let's say, that people use the paper for. So, although he dismissed the amount as chicken feed, he still continued to be getting the money. And Johnson didn't express any regret for saying that that sum of money was achieved. Now you can imagine the actual problems being faced by individuals and families in low income who not only have got anything from the telegraph, but they haven't got any money coming in to maintain their life. So when this row was happening, somewhere in the media, not everywhere, and it was mentioning the liar Johnson dismissing it, dismissing the sum as chicken feed. There were hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, who were only able to dream of getting 50,000 pounds in a whole year, let alone in return for a peace that lasted, required only an hour or less to conjure up. So when the Daily Telegraph and the Sun Telegraph are being mentioned today in the news, the less whimsical ones do acknowledge the fact that there is loan that the Barclays arranged with the bank or banks, and the loan repayment has fallen into arrears, which has left the Barclays no option but to sell the titles, which is why it is in the news today. What does it show about Johnson? It's not only is he contemptuous of the people in poverty, struggling in poverty, but is shameless in criminally abusing his position as front bench member of parliament or as foreign secretary or as prime minister. He has no shame. So, what we have to do is to leave that just as an introduction, and we shall be continuing explaining and exploring the further fuller factual details, and we shall examine the expression made by Anthony Seldon, who is a career writer of biographies of British Parliament, British members of Parliament, because Sheldon or Seldon, who has published the book on Boris Johnson, in fact, which will be available in a few weeks' time, has said that location, the only location we shall discontinue this particular thread, and we shall come back to it in the later editions, either today or later. And all the other items of updates we shall be postponing until there, except to say that the use that we have made of the fact of the Pakistan military regime effectively declaring martial law in Pakistan in the desperate ploy to silence Imran Khan as the critical voice in Pakistan. They've done that by summoning the main news outlets and telling them to stop broadcasting Imran Khan political news activities. This is something that has no real parallel in the subcontinent. So we shall be assessing the impact of Imran Khan being declared effectively persona non grata in the very center of political life, which is the political claims and representations, etc. There is no academic source of critique about what is happening in Pakistan by the junta of the military cliques and fascists taking over the country without formally declaring that they have taken over the country. So we shall be investigating, examining that one and also the various events in the subcontinent in the last 75, 76, 77 years since August 1947. For example, in India, Jawaharlal Nehru's daughter Nehru, Indira Nehru, was the most corrupt occupant of the post of Prime Minister. So corrupt was she that when her younger son, who was given the nickname Sanjay, he was given the nickname because to people who observed Indira Nehru and her relationship with the younger son Sanjay, noticed a very unhealthy proximity between the two, to the point where the observers observed publicly more than once that Indira Nehru was not the Prime Minister. It was Sanjay who was, and he was the one that was responsible for or was behind the many authoritarian, dictatorial decrees that were circulated in the name of the officially incumbent in the post of Prime Minister. Now that went on for too long in the world's greatest democracy. I'll come to that in a second. Without a single mainstream Indian newspaper, news organization mounting an investigation into the very unhealthy relationship that Indira Nehru had with her second son, Sanjay. So outraged were ordinary decent people in India that many of them left the country and others gave up on politics, and there emerged the non Hindu wife of Sanjay, Monica Gandhi. And the Gandhi is not anything to do with Mohanlal Karamchand Gandhi. It's to do with the Parsi man called Gandhi who Indira Nehru had married. So when Sanjay Nehru was actually killed in an helicopter crash, there was hardly any expression. There was hardly any expression of regret, remorse, or solidarity by ordinary people in India for Indira Nehru. So Indira Nehru became the most pernicious, corrupt occupant of the post of Prime Minister of India. It was because her pernicious, corrupt regime that the impact of her foreign policy was exaggerated to the point where the mainstream India and the mainstream political activity involving hundreds of millions of people in India, those were sidetracked or forgotten or suppressed. So, what Indira Nehru couldn't dream about was actually landed, the prize of creating, according to the claims made by Indian authors to this day, which is 10th of Jan 2023. So Indira Nehru sabotaged the process of ordinary, legitimate politics in India. So when she was murdered by two Sikh bodyguards, again, there was no real solidarity with her. In any case, there could not be any solidarity because within months of her being murdered, ordinary innocent Sikh people, SIKH, in Delhi and in other parts of India, were targeted by the supporters of the fascist Indira Nehru. This particular comment that I am about to finish is again part of the world exclusive original. When I visited New Delhi, as I have been saying on occasions, I found evidence of complete and total brainwashing for the British and the English experience and being evident in the behavior of the ordinary English, India born and brought up individuals. Shall be talking more about that and their counterparts that grew up in what is now Pakistan. And I shall update on my unplanned debate with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 1960s, which debate completely demolished him. Shall be talking more about all of those in due course. Now, coming to an end at just under 50 minutes at 12:18 hours GMT on Saturday, the 10th of June, 2023.